Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this side event dedicated to combating climate change in Mediterranean and African in the Middle East. So I'm trying to have a connection with Algeria because our first speaker is supposed to speak through Skype, and unfortunately it doesn't look like it's working. So I will disconnect Skype and I will try to contact him at the end of the session. I just want to close this because ring again during the session. Just as a quick introduction before coming to all the talks that are giving in this session, I would like to share with you the context of this side event, which is co-organized by ParisTech in the framework of its share dedicated to modeling for sustainable development, and that I'm chairing with my colleague Jean-Charles Hourcade. And what we aim to do during our project in this framework is to develop some tools dedicated to prospective modeling. And these tools are understood in the way that instead of trying to predict what will be the future of the different option measures and subsidies and policies that policymakers imagine in order to combat climate change, and especially in the context of economy and energy, we try to provide some lights in order not to act like someone who knows what will happen, but in order just to give them some advices and to provide elements in order to think, to debate, and to evaluate decisions and measures. This is very useful in the framework of energy, and in this framework we are developing a specific model dedicated to represent the technological energy sector, and this enables to debate about different options for future investment for the energy mix, for the measures that can be taken in order to reduce environmental impacts, and the question of substitution between energies. And I think in this session, some of the speakers will come back to these different elements. And what we are really focused on is the idea of finding more relevance and plausibility about the scenarios that we are assessing. So we'll give you just one slight example that is really a specific important problem in the context of Africa and Mediterranean countries, the question of water. Usually when you speak about power mixes in the future, you don't take into account what kind of externalities can be handled. And the question of water in the framework of power mixes is someone that somewhere in the Middle East can be really critical. And for instance, using our tool, and this figure shows you some of our results, you can understand that if you look at a power mix that has no constraint about the level of water that you are using, it can lead you to something very different than a power mix where you constrain the scenario to have the same level of use of the water than what you had in, for instance, year 2005. So you see that in this scenario, for instance, you have much more penetration of solar PV than in the previous one. And then you see also that some renewable options like bioenergy are really not in line with this question of water constraint. I just want, before introducing my guests, to emphasize also another problem that is critical for a lot of African and Mediterranean countries that are subject to revenues coming from oil. This has a link somehow with the climate issue, because as these economies are completely impacted by the falling of oil prices, They have also to combat climate change. And you see here that more than half of the OPEC countries have today not balance between the revenue they expect from these oil revenues and their own expenses. So this economic crisis can be also can have also a critical impact regarding to this climate change issue, because a lot of countries will have to face both problems at the same time. So for what will come next, I will skip Mr. Benyoussef, and during Hadi's talk, I will try to fix my problem of connection with him. But we will try during this session to address the different issues that I've quickly introduced. And we will begin by Hadi Assoumu, who will speak about the technology transfer challenges. Then Mr. Youba Sokona will present the Africa Renewable Energy Initiative. Then Mr. Samir Amous will give a review of African INDCs. And then we will finish with a solution proposed by Mr. Jui Wen-Chen from ASEED in order to understand what can be a solution building a smart city in order to bring water resources. For that last talk, we will have a translation, and then I will ask you to keep with you your headset in order to listen to Mr. Chen. So my colleague Jean-Charles will conclude after all these talks. So I will give you the floor, Hadi. And yes? Vas-y. C'est bon? C'est bon? Yes? Okay, I have to check this.
Okay, so thanks for being here today. And my name is Hadi Assoumu, and I'm happy to introduce this session by talking about technology transfer. And this is work I've been doing with Sandrine Solos, who is here. And actually, I'll try to give the point of view of a modeler. What we try to say is that if we take the agreement from Paris, last agreement, there is a very clear emphasis on technology transfer. And I had two quotes here from Article 10.1 and 10.2, where there are two sides of the problem. The first one is to share the vision. Everybody needs to agree that technology transfer is important. I think this is done. And then to strengthen the cooperative action. And usually in our models, and I would say also in the industrial aspect, technology transfer is a place for competition. We're not really in cooperation. And to see what's the difference, what different views can bring a model, I will first do three things. I just stay as a modeler, and then I'll consider different scenarios and see how targets and technologies lead to different technology solutions. And it will be used basically as a virtual experiment. So after we can discuss and share our views and that, and confront this, the expected contribution in an idealized world with the current status of technologies. So I'll start by giving a few words about the models, but really quickly to give you a sense of what we've based this speech on. So we use a long-term model. So TIAM-FR is a model, a long-term optimization model, meaning the model will represent all end uses: transport, residential, industrial, and agriculture, production, and upstream. And basically, this is a flowchart of the model where we can see the kind of succession of transformation steps. So our model will be our virtual experiment case, and we'll try to minimize the cost of the system. So the objective function here will be to minimize the cost of the system under different constraints. And so the models, the TIAM model, has been developing within the International Energy Agency and the Energy Technology System Analysis Program. And so with this model, we cover 15 regions in the world, and the map shows the different regions and big blocks of regions. So Basically, the first thing we can do with a model is how do we use model? In fact, we use different terms. We talk about climate regime, we talk about mitigation target. We just here talk about constraints to the system. And if we take those constraints, what happens in different settings? The first setting is we act together. Everybody acts together and we're in a coordinated action world. And in this world, we have different targets. The target can be very ambitious, 70% mitigation target, less ambitious, 50% or even 40%. And then we have the different indices and different type of commitment, low, up, and different regional assumption. So I won't go too much in detail, but just few figures showing below the greenhouse gas share between industrialized countries and developing countries. So with this model, what we'll do is to have long-term targets, and this is what you can see in the table there. The developing country will have to pick the emissions in the INDC scenarios and different mitigation level for the global. But quickly, what we get from a model like that the big picture is the business as usual emissions skyrocket. If we do the effort, INDC and all the effort, we can start lowering our emissions, but it's not enough. And the most ambitious scenarios are way down there. So in fact, here, what I'll try to emphasize is what group of country contributes to this mitigation target. And in blue, you have industrialized country, and in yellow, developing countries. This is in the case of a 70% mitigation target from model. And this is in the case of the INDC with the higher commitment. So what I wanted to emphasize here is that basically with the level of action that needs to be done, most of the mitigation, even if we go for 70% or not, will happen outside industrialized countries. And so this is really a point for technology transfer, and developing countries will have almost an equal share and even higher share in a very ambitious climate scenario. So this leads me to the 3 points technology difficulties I would like to emphasize just for the discussion. I won't go in detail because in this 10 minutes talk. The first thing is nuclear. Everybody talks about nuclear, but if we look at the regional development today of nuclear, Africa is not really a big player. There's 16 new nuclear power plants in construction, and none of them are in Africa. Of course, South Africa has some work there, and there are different initiatives to get more nuclear for different parts of in Africa, so we can discuss that. And still, the construction, the time to get this roll up is very long. So we're talking about, let's say, 10 to 20 years before having a plan. So if we start today, we can see that in the next 20 years, there might not be that fast expansion of nuclear. A second technology that shares the same issues, in fact, actually is CCS and carbon capture and storage. And so here again, you have the development of carbon capture and storage in the world. And basically only enhanced oil recovery has been using carbon capture today. And Africa is not a big player there. And again, there is active R&D in South Africa. And last point is solar power, because everybody has the idea that solar power is the really good advantage to Africa. But if we take this graph showing the cost of solar panels for Africa, we see that the costs are still high because of soft costs, because of installation cost, and basically all the element of the business chain is not there yet. You can go up to 16 US dollar per watt. And if we compare that to the price of low income, of the cheapest houses in Africa, we see that the solar panel might be the most expensive thing in the house. And so when we go for massive development, not only in big cities or in very privileged areas, we have to take that into account. So just a few elements for questions is that what happens if we assume in a model full technological potential, no limits, and different mitigation levels? So basically the two bars on your left shows that if we go for a 50 percent mitigation, we'll have around 400 terawatt hour of electricity. The 70% we need more electricity, and INDC looks similar. In green there, you see biomass CCS, meaning if we really want to shoot for the highest target, we need to use biomass and use CCS in order to have negative emission, basically. In blue, you have hydro and you have wind coming after. And the purple part is nuclear. So what happens if we go in a less optimistic or full renewable potential, but constrain CCS and nuclear? And I'll end up with this slide, and we can go with the other speakers and after for the discussion in the element that we see that there are different solutions. If you don't have CCS and you don't want nuclear, then you have a very big bar. That's the one I'm showing there, is that you need to dramatically extend the size of the electric system, because you need to produce more electricity to basically put all thermal uses in industry also in electricity. And then you get to 800 terawatt hours, which is still only the size of current European electricity system. And in this system, you'll need massive solar, and only under the most stringent target does solar come into play. So the point here is that when we talk about technology transfer, it needs to be adapted to the level of mitigation and the world in which we project ourselves. If we are in low commitment, then solar power might be important, but given the cost, it won't be the first strategy to develop. If we go for no CCS or no biomass CCS, also we can have different constraint.
2 minutes left.
2 minutes left.
Yeah.
And so ahead of time in advance. And so the discussion here will really be to share views, because again, this is a model. It helps us think about how the future how we can work this out. And it'd be a pleasure to continue this discussion after and with the other speakers. So thank you.
Thank you very much. All the questions at the end of the talks. And now we will listen to Mr. Youba Sokona speaking about the African Renewable Energy Initiative. So I think this works. Do you want to see this? Do you want to take my place?
Maybe I need to
follow
some of the, if I have 10 minutes.
Yes,
I don't, yes, if I have 10 minutes, let me try how to. That I'm not presenting any modeling. Let me try to get in the ground and then the reality, what the reality tells us, particularly in Africa. I will argue that the solution is renewables and solar. And I'm coming from West Africa, and I guess also you are coming from that part. And then, and in that case, I will argue that in most of the cases, I can name number of countries. They are going from fossil for electricity, 40 cents per kilowatt hour by fossil fuel, 30 cents per kilowatt hour by fossil fuel, minimum of 15 cents to 16 cents oil producing country. And then you can get solar between 8 and 14 cents. And then the future in the continent is on renewables, not on fossil fuel base. And just to give you some indication is that the focus is on climate and then how to get rid of climate, at the same time investing on development. This initiative is about that. It starts with development and then bringing climate. And it's development focus, and then it's open to wider participation. I will not go through any of those details. And I will just give some indication on the context, the goal and principle, the work area, and the governance, and the timeline for the system. And there's no need, if anyone who look at the energy system in Africa, clearly we know that by 2050, there will be more people not having access to electricity than today in the business as usual scenario. That's clear. And then there's no need to spend time on the gap of that. And if you take the most productive sector in the continent, the agricultural sector, the small-scale farming system, I have not come across for the 40 years of my life working on energy issues, anyone fundamentally addressed that issue. Obviously, any value chain of this sector need energy, and this is not at all addressed. And this is where the majority of people are employed. This is where also most of the country are having their income, and then where the livelihood is lie. And then just this is self-explanatory. We don't need to go any detail on that. And then the importance of energy is clearly explained. There is no need to speculate on that. And then we all know that all the poor country, if you are in the early stage of development, the importance of micro, small scale, and mid-sized enterprises. One of the concerns they are facing is energy, is related to electricity. And then this is also something happening in the continent. We all know that. And there's no need to spend. I don't need also to articulate on that between resources, the technology, and the experiences. We have different models in Africa and across the world. And we have the choice in Africa whether we go centralized system. There's no way the majority can go with that. And then we have the possibility to have a decentralized one. You can produce the renewable from less than 3 watts to more than 100 megawatts. That give to us, and then you can start with the resources, the money, the finance you have, and then you can upscale it. This cannot be done in a centralized system. And then you need transmission, you need distribution. And then where you want to go and where you want to start, the option is under our hand. And the energy gap also, this I don't need to spend time, how that need to be filled. What are the goals of this initiative that has been launched in Paris, and some of the principles is to bring together the energy access and then the climate. Sometimes they are contradictory. And then in the mindset of most of the decision makers, they will say that let us go for fossil, and this is where you have development. And then in that case, you completely avoid climate. There is a possibility to bring those together. This initiative is about that. And this initiative also is modest because its target is to have 300 gigawatts of new and additional capacity of production based on purely renewable by 2030, with an initial 10 gigawatts by 2020. This is modest. Anyone who knows Africa, anyone who knows the possibility of the continent, the massive need of energy for development, for industrialization, this is modest. At the same time, it's unbelievable ambitious, because the entire capacity of the continent actually altogether is 150 gigawatts. And if you want to double that only by renewable by 2030, this is unbelievable. It's hugely challenging. And then to have also 10 gigawatt by 2020, actually we put on the system 1 gigawatt per year altogether if we want to have only renewable. And then also to have an absolute number of users connected, absolute number of share of renewable, increase the share of renewable, and producing part of the entirety also of the equipment in the continent. And in order to do that, we said that this is challenging, it's important, but we need to have 5 critical drivers altogether for this transformation to happen. Most of the time we are not addressing, we only address partially of those different issues. I take part to some discussion on finance. They say that, oh, finance is the most important problem. I will argue this is not an important problem. You can solve the financial issues. Water only flow from upstream to downstream. It never flow from downstream to upstream. And then if you get things in place, finance will come. And some of the important element of the principles for this initiative, it has to contribute to sustainable development in the continent. It has to address the entire continent issues, energy issues and need, and full range of renewable energy as a principle. And there is a critical precept in this initiative, the country ownership, the region ownership, public-private engagement, the multi-stakeholder engagement. It's transformative and programmatic. It's not project-based approach. And it's a smart, modern, distributed systems. And then some of the key drivers we need to address in order to bring that in the reality and then to make this transformation happen, all are equally important. We identify 5 key core drivers. First of all, the coordination is crucial, is fundamental. We have a proliferation of initiative of the continent. In the same country, we have no idea who is doing what, who build what, and then to which experience we need to invest on it. The mapping is crucial for coordination and strengthen the policy, regulation, organization, incentive framework. The third area is capacity mobilization first. If capacity does not exist, we move toward building. And sometimes that takes time. We need strategic partnership in between. Capacity mobilization, capacity building, and strategic partnership. And then the fourth core area is finance and funding. Most of the time, we concentrate on finance or we concentrate on funding. We don't bring the two together. You need financing in order to have you need funding in order to have finance to happen. Project development and project support is fundamental. You go to any African country, project will take years and then to happen. And then all those core critical activities, core area of work are equally important. Most of the initiative, they do not address entirely those 4 core activity areas. They just take part of them. And then this is why most of the time we are moving from project to project. And there is 4 also cross-cutting areas equally important. Unless you address those with the core, the 5 core one, you will not have the transformation to happen. Economic and environmental safeguard, multi-stakeholder participation, all the stakeholders and the cluster have to, and then wider monitoring and evaluation, communication and outreach are important. Yes, 1 minute. And then the governance process is will be in place soon. And then I will be heading the independent delivery unit. I'm not going to details. And then this initiative will be implemented during 3 phases. The first phase will concentrate only on small-scale systems. And then we want to address energy access. We want to address the small-scale productive sector. The only way to do that is to concentrate on small-scale systems, not the large systems. And then we prepare the ground for the second phase, the first phase. And then after the first phase, we have the second phase. A larger system can be integrated so that we have a mix of energy systems in a continent rather than one major system. And those are very briefly some of the elements I just want to bring on in order to stimulate discussion. I will argue that fundamentally the present, the future, and the past of the continent is renewables. Thank you.
Okay, now we will give the floor to Samir. Is that okay? But maybe you can, yeah, I can leave. Oui, avec le pointeur, je pense que ça marche.
Merci, thank you, Nadia. Youba, did I heard you correctly when you were saying that you were passing from modeling to concrete action? Yes? And that financing is not a problem?
No.
Okay, thanks a lot. So I wanted to give you a bridge between modeling and concrete action with my presentation, and also to give some practical approaches that will allow to put financing, so so that I would agree with you when you are saying that financing is not a problem. I wanted to present.
Financing is a problem. Fund is not a problem.
Okay.
Finance is not a problem.
Okay.
Financing is a problem, but finance is not a problem.
It's 1 minute from you. Huh? Okay, thank you. I don't know how to. Attends, je crois que c'est l'inverse. Voilà. Okay, so this is a work that have been initiated as a part of a project graduation report as a master degree on finance in Paris. This project has been hosted by CIRED as a summer traineeship in 2016, so it's a recent work. The objective of this work was to develop an innovative approach and model, I would say simplified model for the moment, to determine an incitative compensation value for CO2 reduction in developing countries, and to evaluate financial resources that are needed by developing countries to support the achievement of INDC objectives. This small model is meant as a tool to be used by decision makers, like conference of parties, countries that are willing to implement mitigation project, funding organization that would like to support mitigation project, and any carbon buyers. As a starting point, when we read INDCs that have been published in last September by developing countries, particularly African countries, sorry. So we know that additional resources are requested by developing countries to meet what they call conditional INDC objective. Many, the majority of African countries, I would say, have mentioned the conditional objectives, and most of objectives that have been mentioned are conditional. So additional resources are requested to implement these objectives, but these countries in their INDC did not mention or give any indication on the precise meaning of conditionality, apart from the fact that they mentioned that financial resources are needed. So the principle toward low carbon transition in this country, the principle that this study built on was that condition and modalities to access to these resources should be enough, incitative enough to provide for achievement of INDC objective. What I mean is that if you wanted someone to implement mitigation action, there is a need to provide him with incitative financing. And how we can imagine incitative financing? We could imagine it through a price signal, for example, a CO2 compensation for emission reductions that would be integrated into the financial system. Based on a reference CO2 value, we heard about minimum price or maximum price, but let's talk about a reference CO2 value, which can provide an appropriate response. This model has been implemented under an Excel environment, and it started with fixing a minimum acceptable internal rate of return, for example, 10%, to implement GHG mitigation project. So we just made an assumption that a normal IRR for a country is 12%, but taking into account that there are some energy risks in the future, and that the climate risks are very important, we could imagine country accepting and implementing project with only 10% internal rate of return. So this is I would say the first assumption. But we can, with this model, go ahead with a different assumption of IRR or any other parameter or indicator. So the main variable that have been used here is the energy price. So we have been considered a barrel for $40 to $100 because this study has been focusing on the development of Tunisian solar plan, which involved 5 types of technological actions. And the actions are directly linked to the price, to the oil prices. This model has been applied to Tunisian INDC, and we selected Tunisia because we had the details of data related to the INDC, but also to the Tunisian solar plant, and we have data in particularly for objectives in terms of megawatt to be installed each year, ton of oil equivalent savings, emission reductions, and investment needs to implement these objectives. But this model can be applied to any kind of INDC or any kind of mitigation action.
I don't want to rush you.
Huh? Yes. Only 3 minutes. So, okay, these are some examples that we've taken in this study about what kind of objective different African country has set, and we could see 41% for Tunisia, 32% for Morocco, 50% for Gabon, but none of this country has considered any mean to implement these objectives unless mentions of accessing to new additional resources. So this is the example of let me see. Tunisia, which set an objective of reducing carbon intensity as compared to 2010, like China and Singapore, which considered the same kind of objective, and also the example of Morocco, which considered like Mexico, Gabon, Kenya, Ethiopia, South Korea, emission reduction as compared to business as usual scenario for the 2030 timeline. So none of these countries has really put some details on the way they would like to access to financial or new resources. So in this modeling exercise, we focused on 5 technologies: wind power, centralized PV, roof PV, parabolic thermosolar, and biomass. And we consider the actual costs, capex and opex in Tunisia. So these are some indication on the internal rate of return of wind power in Tunisia if we don't consider any CO2 compensation. You can see that for a barrel at $40, the internal rate of return is below 1%, while it is only above 10% if the barrel is at $80. For another example of PV, it is minus 5% if the barrel is at 40, and it is again less than 10% even at $100 per barrel. Biomass is almost the same thing. So there is no possibility for developing countries to go ahead with implementing the objective if there is no access to I would say access to new financial mechanism or funds, or at least to have a price signal for CO2. And one kind of approach would be to send this price signal. For example, here for wind power, the reference price for CO2, if the barrel is at $40 for wind power, it's $55. It would be 135 for PV and 114 for biomass. If we go ahead with a barrel at $60, that would be 19 euro for wind power. And if we consider solar thermodynamic, that would be 270 euro per ton of CO2, even though we have a barrel at $100. As you can see here, yes, you can see that at $80 per barrel, there is no need to compensate CO2 for wind power. So, and the model could also calculate the resources needed to implement or to achieve this price signal. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We're going to have Mr. Chen speaking about the sponge-city concept. And Mr. Chen, if you can come here. Ouais, non, je vais lui laisser ma place. Yes. So please use your headsets because there will be channel 2, yes, for the headsets. Check avec lui si ça marche en ce moment. Je sais pas ce qu'il fait. Il appuie pas sur le bon bouton. Please, Mr. Chen, when you want. Okay.
女士、先生们，大家好，我是 JW 生态工华的发明人陈瑞文，来自台湾。不论你来自哪里，今天我们聚集在 COP22， 为的就是要如何拯救我们共同的母亲地球。因为她生病了，因此我们想利用本次机会，提供给大家一个新的方向、新的做法，不是理论，而是具体最有效的做法，就是 JW 生态工法。地球38亿年来，在短短30年，我们用掉1/3的资源。美国前副总统高尔在2006年提出不愿面对的真相，告诉我们，改善环境的黄金期就在短短这几年。无独有偶，2014年，科学家告诉我们，地球将在100年内灭绝。最主要的原因来自哪里？那就是我们原来的森林超限利用开发，我们将森林变成现在的水泥丛林。地球生病了，环境恶化，极端气候，不当的施工方法，将地球带往死亡的道路。我们用了很多透水铺面，建设了很多道路，阻断了生态系统的发展，造成了都市的软化以及水资源的浪费、人工化。我们该怎么办？全球都在推行透水铺面，尤其我们可以看到美国 LID 的做法。但效果如何呢？我们看了20年，它的成效非常的不良，那也造成了很大的错误。透水沥青，它在我们都市 会让我们的都市增加2到3度，可以说是错误的施工方法比错误的政策比贪腐更可怕。2016年全球热，有对抗的方法吗？我发现了一个秘密，就是利用道路让它呼吸，打开气孔，让整个道路能够捕捉二氧化碳、抗软化，能够调节我们整个都市的热岛，以及改善我们的环境。这个技术呢，在全球我们获得全球的一个专利肯定，也获得国际间很多的奖项。那我把它命名为 ZW 生态工法。ZW 2个字是我英文名字的缩写，所以这是一个科学家、一个发明家需对自己的发明来负责。我们的施工方法非常简单，我们利用了废塑胶取代了钢筋回收，上面铺上了水泥，我们成为一个结构的一个硬铺面，施工非常简单便宜。当然，最主要的是我们必须要能够承受飞机的重量以及卡车任何的车辆的一个行驶，我们必须要具备永续性。因此，这一项技术在台湾的使用，我们提供了保固10年的效期。当然，在10年来，我们见到了非常多的见证，我们可以看得到。所有的铺面在10年内没有任何一个损坏。当然，这道生态工法不只是铺设在地板上，它最主要是在我们整个地球的表面，它都可以来使用。当然，我们在沙漠，我们可以让整个沙漠自动造水，也可以让沙漠成为绿洲，创造绿洲经济。这道生态工法创造的 ZW 生态城市，它最主要的功能是什么？就是对付我们环境的3大灾害，如我们的水灾跟旱灾，我们的空气污染、水污染，我们的热岛、我们的冷岛。当然，还有更重要的就是我们的城市里面我们的食安问题，我们可以在城市创造城市良田。经科研的证明，这道生态工法在1个小时可以捕捉12000 mm 的雨水，也就是说，我们不会造成表面的径流，可以将雨水充分回收。在台湾的汐止有一个实际案例，我们将传统不好的排水沟把它封住，然后将我们的雨水留存。那经过科研的一个实际证明，我们的回收率可以高达220%，这发表在国际期刊。那当然，在水污染的空气污染的治理，我们因为地板具备的空调效益，所以在20分钟的汽车排放的污染物呢，我们可以捕捉70到90%的 CO2 二氧化碳。当然，它可以降低，另外又可以降低我们整个都市的温度，可以控制我们整个都市的一个温度的上升。以这2张图来看，我们比传统的柏油路可以降低21度。坐在北京奥林匹克公园，我们可以直接除雪，道路不结冰。相对的，我们在污水的治理，我们原来传统的水沟，它会产生一些恶臭，当然在水沟里面会有蚊蝇、蟑螂、蚊虫，以及我们的病媒蚊。那经过这道生态工法的铺面以后呢， 这一些都变成是一个被封闭的。那我们的水质经过检测是高于我们河川的水质的好的优良。那当然对照于美国 LED 的草锅，它会产生优氧污染，那会造成更大的一个污染源。这套生态工法可以在我们可以在食安方面可以看到，在都市的水泥地上，在我们的沙漠，我们一样可以创造绿洲经济。那当然，在都市里面所创造出来的蔬果，一个蔬菜水果，它可以是一个有机的一个认证。也就是说，我们在都市、在城市，我们都可以得到有机的蔬菜以及有机的水果。好，这套生态工法，事实它就等于在整个铺面的下面，它就是一个水库。所以上面一条路，下面一条河，一个水库。那对于我们环境的污染里面呢，我们在空气污染跟水污染，我们提供的是一个冷气，提供的是一个空气对付空气里面，我们是一个清净机。对于水污染呢，我们就是一个水质过滤机。那在于对付热岛效应的效果呢，我们就像一个冷气机，也像是一个暖气机，它提供给你冬暖夏凉的一个城市。那在城市的里面呢，我们提供给你是一个城市良田，这可以为我们都市里面提供给我们未来70亿人口的一个选择。那在 COP21 的时候，受到了30几个国家的媒体的报道。当然，在这10年来，受到400个媒体的报道，尤其是 Discovery。那在 21的时候，法国的国策顾问也特别的支持，以及摩洛哥的环境部长。最后，我想呼吁大家要重新思考，改善地球不是花大钱，也不是靠高理论或口号，更不是少数国家就能单独达成的。进入这套生态工法，愿提供给大家一个新的方向，同时也非常希望大家一起合作，用简单、便宜、安全、永续生态的方法，与我们配合的方法的这套生态工法，与我们家人以及地球做出贡献。我们也有配合的专业设计团队，也有国际基金可以协助大家。谢谢大家。
Thank you very much, Mr. Chen. Thank you. Now, Jean-Charles. So I would like to invite you, Jean-Charles, to make a brief conclusion of this side event.
Well, it's not a summary. Well, it's not some reactions to at least to give you some ideas to. Well, I will try and respond or build upon the distinction of Youba between financing and funding. We read a lot of things, including the last proposal about China and so on. So my
excuse me, by the way, you have 5 minutes.
Oh no, but I will be short. That's fine. No problem. Ben, je peux toujours, tu sais ça. Always on time. You know, I'm old enough to have witnessed a lot of the same problems, things the 3 or 4 past decades. You have the engineers; they have some ideas. They think a lot of things are possible. And then you have the economists who say, well, that might be costly. And then we try to see how to incite people. And then you have the idea of carbon pricing. But carbon pricing makes a problem because Shukla, my friend, always says, well, the $50 of carbon doubles the cost of cement in India. And then you have now people who say, well, financing will do the job. We need finance. And then, in part, Youba is right. There are a lot of finance in the world. I put the finger on the gap between finance and funding. Okay, the finance is there, and funds are there. But you know, in the past, we have more or less the same age. You know, in the domain of people who work on development, we have this idea of donor fatigue. This means that, well, we have finance, we have funds, but how you are sure that the funds go in the right direction, in the right projects, in the right policies? Well, we know that a lot of problems with corruption, lobbying, bargaining, which means that's well, we have a lot of examples of misdirections of the funds. And this makes a problem, because that's when you go back to the treasury of any country, they say, well, I don't want to put the money there because I'm not sure of that it will be rightly directed. And but at the same moment, what is new and I think good is that we live in a curious situation in which all the big macroeconomists in the world, so I don't propose to talk about macroeconomics because for you that's in general here, that something very abstract in the newspapers. And what they say, well, we risk the high-level people in the US, like Bernanke or Larry Summers, they say, well, the world is perhaps entering a period of secular stagnation. What does it mean? We have a lot of money, a lot of savings, but not enough investments. Your financing versus funding story. This is not simply a problem for the carbon transition, not a problem for people interested in developing solar energy in Africa. That's a problem for the world. And now, how we can, as a conclusion, try to make the link. I always speak, Nadia knows that, I'm allowed. I always speak the simple anecdote, because things are complex. You can say that in a very complex way. That's, in practice, very simple. Simple is that, example of my son, he's a rich engineer in France, in telecommunication, very well paid. He has 2 houses near Geneva. And now he has money. What he did? He bought an apartment in Paris. So he accelerates the type of misdirection of investment in the world, typical. He can become, he's not a pension fund, but that's a problem for the pension funds. Then money goes in real estate, in purchase of lands, speculation, and short-term investments and short-term products. Imagine now a world, and that's good, there is a good news in the last COP in Paris. The article is the article 108 in the decision of the Paris Agreement, which says, it talks about the recognition of the economic and social value of mitigation activities. What does it mean? You imagine a world in which we agree on this value. This is not a price, this value inserted in the evaluation of the investments. And then bank can say that, well, they can build upon public guarantees by the governments. The North governments commit themselves to public guarantees on investment, like they did when we fund the railway system in Europe and in the US. Then the bank can say, well, thanks to that, I will help my friend here to invest in solar energy. The guarantee for the arbitrariness of the project selection is that the projects are retained only if they embark the social value of carbon. And the bank can invent product to say to my son, oh guy, instead of investing in this apartment in Paris, invest in this bond backed by public guarantees and embarking this social value of carbon. So this means that I will achieve with that. Madame Royal launched an initiative to about how to assess this social value of carbon in view of developing new funding systems to bridge the gap between finance plenty of finance and funding. So this is not the solution, but I mean, this is some progress, and I hope very soon we'll have options and solutions for that, for this gap. Thank you.
During which I will try to connect with my Algerian guests, and so you can maybe.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So I see one hand, two hands, but perhaps Marianne, you can. Mariam, go.
Just I wanted to point out the issue of fossil fuel subsidies, and to be honest, I really don't know how important they are in Africa. So I don't know. I don't know that. I know that they are important at the global level, and my question was if they are. I would like to know to what extent the subsidies toward fossil fuel prevent the development of renewable energies. To Mr. Sokona.
You are?
I think that said it's not working. Okay. I think that this is an important question. It also is a chicken egg problem because of most of the government, the country are locking in a system. They have difficulties to get out, and because of the social pressure. Because there is subsidy at the same time is unbelievable expensive. So that particularly most of those countries are the electricity is fossil fuel based, is highly subsidized, and then they cannot have the right tariff system in place because of social pressure. And it's a bit chicken. You cannot just say that we need to remove the subsidy and then we invest, and then that brings the issue of finance and funding. Most of the time we mix the two, they are completely different. And then that creates some problem. And then we, by that fact also, we do the kind of analysis just Samir presented, because we have to make clear if you want to make transition or transformation, you need funding in order to have to buy time and then to put in place the policy and the mechanism, all the different key core area I indicated. You have to work all of them in time. The mistake is only to think that if you remove subsidy, problem will solve.
Sir, yeah, go ahead.
I'm Virgilio Viana from Brazil, and it seems to me that an obvious solution for the climate agenda in Africa is reforestation and restoration of degraded areas through agroforestry systems that combine biomass and food. So my question to the panelists is, what are your thoughts in your schemes in terms of doing a massive large-scale restoration, reforestation in Africa to produce biomass, and how to come up with the financing? You talked about price signals, you had different models, you have different analysis of carbon prices and so on. So what is missing for such a mechanism to be put in place?
Prefer to leave the floor to my African friends, but
okay. I'm somehow from Africa too, so I can answer. I think the point is, what is the level of development that Africa seeks? If you speak about reforestation and biomass development in order to sustain food, and that's your point. That okay? I think maybe you have just one part of the problem, because the countries in Africa maybe wants to rely on developments that go much more far than just satisfaction of food and the type of development that is linked to this kind of solutions. So you can avoid the fact that energy.
假如有需要，我们这边有基金，也有技术团队，我很希望的能够把这个技术带到各位，跟各位来分享，我们怎么样来救这个地球，我们的母亲。 谢谢。
Thank you. I have a person. If somebody you want to go.
So about this question, there's one example. It's I know a group of young entrepreneurs in Africa, and basically the problem is that what they're trying to do is to have a critical mass of SMEs. Because today we're talking about energy needs. We say how to supply the electricity needs in Africa. But the question is, what are those electricity needs? And actually, if you see the TSO, the transmission system operator, the big problem is today, you have a factory that wants to install somewhere in the city. And this factory will have two questions. Do I have access to gas? Do I have access to electricity? And what's the quality of this electricity? And those are the big drivers of the electrification within the cities and around. Meaning that if you have a big consumer that comes, you have the transformer, you have the beginning of an electric system, and then it can spread out. But in fact, having the authorization, having all this legal process, having to build the lines, it's specific work. And in fact, there is no magical solution. And there's somehow you need motivating and convince people who try to do that on the ground. And I think developing SMEs and supporting them to be able to have a business, to be able to have the contract will be the strongest incentive, because they have the innovation and they know the problem. They know how to solve the problem. They know where the need is. They know where they need electricity. They know what the power is and what you can cut. And there is an untapped innovation potential. It's not much more difficult than what's happening in Europe, in other countries. You need people to see the problems and try to fix them. Of course, somehow you need the money, you need the challenge, and so I would say for me, industry and the network and the way we live with energy is important, but there's some people who are really ready to do that. But of course, today they're not there yet. And I mean, I don't have a clear answer for that, but at least that could be a direction to support small and medium companies.
I would like to just to comment on that, because that's makes the link between this gap between finance and funding and what has just been said, okay? And also relates to what has been said about the, I would say, the human capital to mobilize. Because the way in which they fund the financing and funding systems are run has a huge influence in the capacity of any country, including France, to develop SMEs, innovation at the local scales, and the chain of innovation between the local scale and sometimes the big programs. Because, you know, including for a bank, some of them, they prefer large programs, very well secured, and doesn't like to put the hands on the little initiative because it's too risky. So, I mean, all the story of how we succeed to develop schemes after to put the money to the people on site, we really can develop a ground innovation is really a challenge. And I hope that this will be on track on the following years. But well, the past dictates me that we have to pay attention. Capacity to the system to misdirect the funds is really huge. So we have to pay attention. Is there some other comments from the floor? Before I leave, I let the panelists to give one minute to each of them. You want to add to something? You want to add a question? No? Nobody? Then perhaps we can start. Well, Mr. Chen, yes, go. 1 minute each, and that's fine. Okay. Conclude, and then fine.
Okay. 我是一个发明家，我创造了上百个专利。今天我把它带到 COP22， 同时我也带来了基金。各位，假如你的地区、你的国家、你的单位 需要基金的配合，需要技术的协助。我在这里非常乐意的，愿意为我们的非洲提出贡献。谢谢大家。
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vas-y.
Okay, I guess my conclusion word would be innovation needs to be planned. Innovation won't arise. Okay. Okay, I just mentioning that innovation needs to be planned and supported. And we have all the tools, we have some small problems, but I would say, if we go for the aim, the 2 degree, the 1.5 degree, if we're really serious about it, then we have few solutions. And we know that we can go there with everybody, and Africa can do his work. But unless we really face how huge the problem is, we will always go for the smallest solution. We shouldn't get satisfied with small scale reduction and go for ambitious reduction and support the people who can do it.
So my personal conclusion is about the fact that the urgent investments have to be dedicated to young educational issues, because as it was raised in the discussion, the technology will take time to evolve and to be ready and to be invested in. But there are a lot of young people that need to be part of this huge project to combat climate change and to fulfill a project for the development of Africa, North Africa, and all these countries. So I think governments usually lack of investments in this area.
Thank you. I have no conclusion, simply to add one sentence to what Nadia said. Part of the problem and solution is in the scientific collaboration between the academics, and because there are in practice a lot of funds in our systems, but we have to improve the capacity of developing the education and the collaboration in such a way that this really comes back to the countries and is directing on things useful for the countries, including our countries. So, Youba.
I think combating climate change in the region, Mediterranean and Africa, is embedded in development. And those are very complex and complicated issues. And most of the time we think in silo, and then we look at one specific element, we are not get there. Development is complex and complicated. When you think you solve one problem, 10 will pop up. And it's need an holistic approach, and then to face all the different aspects at the same time, rather than just having the carbon price or price signal, and then you find you solve the problem.
Yeah, you have so many gaps to bridge. So we have gaps in technology transfer, in scientific collaboration, in innovation, in finance and
funding,
SMEs, creation, price signal, scales of projects. So we have really hard work to do to combat climate change. That's my conclusion.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the audience.